Todd, welcome to the Colorado Food Magazine, Season 2, Episode 3. Today we're interviewing Todd Inglee. He is the Executive Director of the Colorado Beef Council, so welcome.
Thanks, John.
We're very excited to have you. We're talking, one of our goals at the Colorado Food Magazine and the Hispanic Restaurant Association is to tie everything together. We've talked about it several times. We've met a couple times beforehand. We're, obviously looking to see how we can work together. And one of those is to communicate what you do at the Colorado Beef Council to our audience and vice versa, what we do to the Beef Council, and make things, where's the beef?
There you go. Yep.
I had to slide that one in there. I was like, my son in the background would be like, oh my God,
That's
he did
right.
go there. So first of all, tell us about yourself, how you got started, where you grew up. I understand you grew up in Golden, Colorado, and it was almost home week here just a few minutes ago with Brendan. He graduated from Wheat Ridge.
Yep.
And so did you?
Yeah, I graduated from Wheat Ridge High School as well.
And you had some relatives there now?
Yep. I had a nephew who graduated last year, and then I've got a niece that'll be graduating, I think, next year.
Yeah.
Or year
Brendan's
after.
like, I knew I liked you. So,
So
anyway,
it's great.
So,
Well, thanks for having me here and for asking me to be here. I think what you guys are doing is great. I think it's a great compliment to what we are doing with the Beef Council, and yeah, I'm looking forward to chatting with you.
Yeah, it's a wide-ranging conversation because not only do we want to talk about what you do at the Colorado Beef Council, we at the Colorado Food Magazine and our team and our crew and our vision is to tell the story behind everything, how you got involved with the Colorado Beef Council. I understand you had your own ranch growing up, and you grew up in Golden. So let's start there.
Yeah. Oh, great. Yeah. It's fun. I've been fortunate. I really look back at the path that has led me up, to my career now. It's just been great. I've loved it. And you never get to where you are without all these circuitous little events and things to get you where you are, right?
Right.
So
It's fun. From the Colorado Food Magazine, we were talking when I asked you to be on the podcast, I said, you're the perfect fit for the Colorado Food Magazine. You're the quintessential Colorado man.
Oh.
The Colorado Beef Council, a rancher, I grew up in Golden, all these things. But it's cool. There's so much richness to Colorado. But,
there is.
when you talk about the cowboy, you fit that profile.
Oh, well, thanks.
And so
I grew up in Golden. My family has got a small ranch west of Evergreen, about 8 miles west of Evergreen there. And so I grew up. My mom and dad moved up there not long before I was born, actually. My 2 older brothers were old enough to start going to school. They're going to have to go to school over in Georgetown or Idaho Springs. It's in Clear Creek County back in those days. And my folks didn't want to make that drive, and so they moved into Golden to where we could get to school and stuff easier down there, but kept the ranch. And
so the ranch is up on Idaho Springs.
It's west of Evergreen.
Okay.
Yep. So anyway, long story short, so I grew up with a foot in town in Golden, and then another foot up in the mountains there with our ranch. So I had the great opportunity of getting to look at both sides of the agricultural industry
and the agriculture. So you have a great mix there. So what was everybody nowadays? Everybody migrated to the big cities. Denver's obviously become a bigger city, very rich in the city life, and so.
Yeah.
In Colorado, I grew up in Colorado, graduated back with the dinosaurs when they had abacuses. But Windsor, Colorado, about 90 miles from here, a very small town, about 5,000. I think it's about 20,000 now. But so it was, Denver was known as the cow town way back then.
Yep.
But now it's all these different industries, diversity and stuff like that. Now, what was it like to grow up on a ranch? Is the stereotypes of getting up at dark 30, riding the horses, all those? Talk about that.
Our story is a little different than the typical ranch kind of environment because we didn't do it full time.
Okay.
So my dad had other businesses here. He was an entrepreneur, so he he had other businesses that he was creating and running, and excuse me, and so long story short, so we kind of did it in a little bit different way. We had animals. We had cattle up there just in the summertime, just grazing on the summer grass.
Oh, nice.
And it's just too difficult right where that is. It's just frozen and it's a miserable place in the wintertime to have animals. So we would, we'd get the cattle up there in the summer or in the spring and graze them on grass all summer, and then we'd sell them in the fall.
Oh, nice.
So we were
Okay.
just a portion of the cattle industry, which we call a stalker or backgrounder. So we just had cattle a short time.
What was the best part? What are some of the great memories you remember about that?
So the thing that I remember the most that really made me passionate about the industry was just being out in the meadows with the animals. I just loved watching those cattle and learning about how they act and, watching them grow. I just loved caring for the animals. And then as the years went on, I started having more responsibility of taking care of the ranch. So I became the manager of the ranch. So I started, having to deal with the fences and making sure the grass was growing and irrigating and doing that. So it became more of an all-encompassing thing for me as a person. But I just fell in love with the animals, the smells, the being outside, working with my hands, and that's kind of what I loved about this industry and the people who make up the industry.
And it sounds like there's a little more complexity than just putting some cows in a field.
Yes.
And that you see, the city slickers. I'm a combination thereof. So
Yep.
but I live out in the country now, but being in the military for so long, I was always in the city, and you just get away from the countryside.
Sure.
And I'm finally back into hunting and all the things that I missed for so many years.
Yeah. Yeah.
What was the hardest part?
The hardest part has been trying to balance everything. So it wasn't, and we can talk a little bit more about my other jobs in the industry.
We will.
So years ago, I became close friends with a rancher down southeastern Colorado, and he took me under his wing. We developed a partnership. I started running cattle with him on his ranch. And then over the years, that kind of just expanded. I was able to operate my own branded beef business. So cattle that I would source from him, we would graze them in the mountains in the summertime, and then I would get them processed, and then I would market that beef online. We shipped all over the country, as well as some restaurants, retail stuff here in town. So when I was doing that, I was also taking care of the ranch and trying
you're a busy
to
man.
balance all of that with my home life and kids growing up. And that's about the time that our first one was starting to graduate from high school. And so it was just a busy time. So I think that was the most difficult, was just trying to balance all of that and keep all of that going. Because there's a never ending list of things when you're managing a ranch to take care of, right?
Right. Oh, any type of business, you're wearing 23 hats, it seems like.
Yep.
I mean, all the way from you got to accounting, marketing, logistics, and especially if you have a live animal, you got to make sure they're taken care of.
Yep.
And I'm sure there's a very complex part like the medicines and the sicknesses that you have to worry about, then the transportation, then eventually selling, and then getting them cut up.
Exactly.
So,
and Mother Nature is always working against you.
that's true.
There are things that happen naturally that are in your favor, but it seems like you're always battling those things that are against you.
That's a metaphor for life right there.
Right. Yeah.
I see that. So,
and one of the lessons that I learned, kind of interesting through that, is you just need to keep working at it. There's not a rush to get it done during that season. You just do the most you can, and you didn't get it all quite done, then you just got to push it off until the next season. And it's just an ongoing list of things.
Define something that you have to push off, because I'm not that familiar with ranching. So
yeah, it could be like 2013, we had the big floods right here that happened here. Right. So Upper Bear Creek runs through our place, and we got devastated with the floods. That ran at flood stage for almost 2 weeks. So we had
I remember that.
Huge stream banks that just got carved out of our pastures, and a couple access roads that just got totally washed out. So it's just having to rebuild all that and to try to take care, and so that we're not having a lot of erosion and stuff on the stream banks. So trying to fix that, but that just takes time and energy and money. And you run short of all that. So you just do the best you can, patch it up, and then next year you kind of do a little bit more, and then the next year you do a little bit more, and then you got to reseed the pasture, and that takes a couple of years for that grass to really come in and grow. And so this is challenging.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure it is.
Yeah.
So let's talk now, broaden the picture up, talk about ranchers. Colorado ranchers, specifically because we're the Colorado Food Magazine,
yep.
and you're the Colorado Beef Council. What are some of the biggest challenges they face?
Right now, looking at probably the top issues that I see that our industry is facing right now is the market disruption that the pandemic had. We're still trying to recover from that. So we're far from, and that comes from supply chain issues. So
trucks,
lack of labor in processing plants to increase demand from consumers. Right now we're at an all-time high in consumer demand, a 33-year high in consumer demand.
What do you think is driving that?
I think a lot of it was during the pandemic. A lot of people started to cook on their own because, food service was shut down, right? And as your industry knows.
Oh, yeah.
So people started cooking at home, started looking for more comfort food kind of recipes. So we saw an increase in internet traffic of searches for comfort food and how to cook at home. So the beef industry has got a lot of resources online at beefitswhatsfordinner.com. Ton of recipes that you can dial in the cut of beef that you have, and then you'll populate a huge list of recipes.
Right, and we talked about having some of our chefs from the Hispanic Chefs Association and the Colorado Chefs Association developing some recipes for you. Yep. And then obviously, we wanted to invite you to a lot of the things we do.
Absolutely.
So wow. So that
was huge. A lot of people just wanted to cook more, and I think there was, as you saw, a lot of people purchase patterns were disrupted. People started hoarding things.
Right.
Food was a big part of that, right?
Yeah,
they wanted to be secure with their family, right? Yeah. So long story short, we had a lot of phone calls from, and this is, I'm maybe getting a little too detailed.
No, there's not. This conversation flows because we want to talk about issues, how to solve them, communicate that these are some of the things that, I just can't get my beef. Well, there's a whole complex chain behind that we want to communicate to the consumer that they may not be aware of.
Sure.
That's one of the purposes of having you here.
So remind me, I've got like 4 or 5 issues that I think the beef industry is facing.
Okay, well, go ahead.
So the first one is this supply chain issue, right?
Right.
So what we started getting phone calls from consumers saying, I can't find the beef in the grocery store. Where can I buy it? I want to buy it direct. Can I just buy from a rancher? And we also noticed ranchers having problems getting animals processed.
Yep. Okay.
Right. And so we were like, well, let's put things 2 and 2 together. The producers still need to get the meat processed. But there were ways of smaller plants and stuff of getting that done. So what we did is we created what we call the Colorado Local Beef Directory. So we started listing ranchers who were able to sell direct for consumers that could go on there either by looking at a map of where they wanted to buy or by choosing the type of beef that's grown, what kind of beef they want to buy. And so we listed that together, and right now we've got over 80 ranches listed.
And where do they find this?
It's on the Colorado Beef Council website.
Is it coloradobeefcouncil.com?
cobeef.com.
Okay.
And then you click on the cooking tab and you scroll down and you look for the Colorado Local Beef Directory.
Oh, that'll be one of the tools that we can communicate to the world or our consumers and our audience how to get those places, because it helps the rancher too. Okay, so
that's been a great tool that I think hopefully we've tried to help solve that. It is not getting rid of all the issues because there's still a lot of retail stuff going on there too. But so another one would be sustainability, an increase in consumers wanting to know that the product is sustainable or is produced sustainable.
Right. Take care of the lands and the animals.
Exactly.
Right.
So that's something that the beef industry has always done in its history, but we haven't done a really good job of telling that story. So we have tried to increase tools that tidbits of information and just communicating to consumers of what we do that is sustainable.
What are some of those things that are sustainable?
When you look at sustainable, when you look at anything sustainability wise, I think there's probably 3 different areas in sustainability. There's an economic level, a cultural or societal, and then environmental.
Right.
So you look at those 3 things. The beef industry does a great job, and I think I've given you some handouts.
Yes, you
that
give me
show
quite
that.
a bit. Yes,
those are also available on our website that you can find. But talking about economic sustainability, you think of the contributions that the beef industry contributes to the state on an ongoing basis.
Right, economically,
right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, that's for tens of thousands of jobs, all the way from, like I said, the retail side, the restaurateur, to the rancher, to the logistics side, everything. Yes,
exactly.
That's a great point.
Yeah, I mean everything that it builds a whole sub-economy of itself, right?
Ecosystem.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. So if you look at, I wrote down some numbers here because I thought that'd be interesting. $5 billion in cash receipts generated by agriculture in general. Colorado and cattle and calf. Of that $5 billion, 72% of that is cattle and calves.
Oh, really?
So that's the contribution that just the cattle industry contributes to the state.
Oh, nice.
Is close to $5 billion. It's huge. So, yeah, you look at 2.6 million head of cattle in Colorado. There's over 14,000 cattle farms and ranches.
How many?
14,000.
Really?
Yep.
In Colorado?
In Colorado alone.
I would never have thought that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and we're number 5 in the nation for the number of cattle that are on feed.
Do you know who the first 4 are?
Oh, it would be Texas.
California?
No. It'd be Texas, Kansas, Oklahoma, Nebraska, Iowa are probably those top
all
ones.
central Midwest.
It's right where the grain segment
belt
is.
Yeah. Okay. That's a great point.
Yeah.
Okay. Excellent.
But it's kind of neat. Think about Colorado. We're in a really unique place geographically. Why the cattle industry is so big here? Because we're close to feed sources for cattle. We're close to processing, the processing segments. So Colorado is kind of centrally located for all that business to happen, and transportation is easy in and out of here. So we're in a really great place for the cattle industry to be big as it is. And so that's why, agriculture is the second largest contributor to the Colorado's economy. And of that, the beef industry is over 70% of that.
That's very significant.
It's a big deal.
Yeah, no kidding.
But it's kind of hidden. A lot of people don't think of that.
Well, and that's the purpose of what we have here. We're trying to show beyond just the plate in the Colorado food and a foodie and just a snapping picture, the complexity of the entire food ecosystem. We've talked about it, and I've talked to, Catherine Boxler at the Department of Agriculture and a couple other people. We're going to try to put together just this all Colorado food show where every product, and I know it's big, but once again, I didn't know it was that big.
Yeah.
But it's also, that's the cool thing about what we're doing is we're tying all those components. As you said, I was pronouncing it wrong. I said grate to plate, and you were, and it was gate to plate.
Yeah.
That
Gate to plate.
There's
also farm to fork.
Farm to fork, farm to table. Yeah.
Farm to table.
Yep. I know. I'm just an old guy. All these young guys, they correct me. Like, bring me into the modern colloquialisms.
Yeah.
And so what are some other issues the ranchers face?
So I think, so let's see, we were talking sustainability, the pandemic market disruption. Meat alternatives is another big thing that I think our industry is watching. Right now, meat alternatives make up on both retail and commercially food service, less than 1% of all sales are meat alternatives, plant-based products. But that's something that, of course, as a meat protein industry, everybody's concerned about. So producers, beef producers are got their eyes on that, watching that carefully.
So that's considered a strategic threat.
Correct.
Not a direct threat yet, but a strategic threat.
Correct.
From that. So,
yeah.
Okay.
And what I find is interesting too, the marketing, how those products are being marketed, I think are a little misleading.
Okay.
You see how people talk about it being better for the environment, better for health, things like that. And if you really break it down and look at how those products are made, some of those things, I don't think a lot of the marketing efforts don't live up to what the product is really about.
I'm a beef guy, I admit it. I mean, everybody has their different lifestyles.
Sure.
And I'm good with that. But I'm a beef guy. I'm a steak guy. I love it.
And of course, I'm biased, right?
No,
and
so am I.
And I'm not knocking the product. I would encourage people to really look at how things
do your research.
Are marketed. We're held to a very high level standard of marketing beef. So as a state, we're an independent state authority. So the Colorado Beef Council was created by the state legislature.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
In 1965, mandating that a percentage of the sale of every cow is collected by us and then used for a marketing and promotion and communication type effort for the industry.
Right.
So when you are under guidelines like that, there also was a national promotion effort that took place 1985 that was enacted in 1987. So nationally, every cow that's sold, $1 is collected, 50 cents gets collected and stays in the state for promotion research efforts.
Right.
The other 50 cents goes to a national level program to do advertising and things.
Oh, nice.
At national level that's where the Beef It's What's for Dinner tagline came from.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and all of that is funded by beef producers themselves. They thought it was important enough to promote their own product that they
Right.
Contribute a portion of the sale of every animal to that effort. Long story short, when the federal level program kicked in, USDA administers that. So we fall under the guidelines of USDA. So everything that we market and sell, we have to get approved by USDA. And so we can't knock other commodity food products.
Right.
So when we talk about meat alternatives, I can't say that they're bad for you and all this stuff because there's other commodity products that are in there. Soybeans or pea proteins, things like that. So
Right.
we can't be fighting against each other in agriculture.
And I think there's enough room for everybody.
I agree.
I
the
really,
big thing
really
we
do.
talk about is choice.
Right, exactly.
Let's don't take choice away. Let's let consumers choose what they want to do.
Yeah, and that's the best way. Let the market, let the people talk about that. I'm firmly believe in that. Let the free market do that. And
Yep.
so I totally agree.
Yeah.
So we talked about the strategic threat of meat alternatives. Obviously, I'm biased too. I'm a big steak guy. And so what any other issues?
I think the other big one that's of course popping up all over now that probably wasn't on my list a year ago, to the extent that it is now, is just the cost of production with inflation and everything going up as it is.
From the rancher's perspective, what's driving the costs up?
Fuel is a big one.
Oh, that's true.
Right?
Yeah.
All that you look into there. There's so a lot of ethanol production byproducts. So like mashed corn from ethanol plants is used as cattle feed. It's still got good protein in it, but it's a little less costly than full on corn. So long story short, when you have fuel production being diminished, there's less of that product that's out there.
So that's
right?
a whole chain that nobody thinks about.
Exactly.
That's affecting the price over here.
Exactly.
Okay, of course.
Or
I know
it's being used for other things to keep the economy going.
Supply and demand.
Yep.
Okay.
So fuel is a big one, and that impacts the cost of transporting, fertilizer, all this stuff. All of this stuff that's happening.
And
resources are
wise
becoming
from
harder to
overseas.
find.
Yeah, that's the supply. I understand.
Yeah.
I know just with the things going on in Ukraine.
Exactly.
They're a huge producer of grain. I think the world's largest, if I
They're
remember correctly.
They're in the top couple, that's for sure.
And then, of course, they produce a lot of fertilizers. So that's really impacting worldwide, just in addition to the pandemic and all the logistical chain there.
Exactly.
So what are some of the really good things happening?
Well, the other thing, too, I think real quickly is this. So this drought, when people talk about the drought here in Colorado, this isn't just coming on this year. Droughts happen over a long period of time, right? And different parts of the state have experienced different severity of this drought.
Right.
So my partner down in southeast Colorado, they've had a drought that's been going on down there for well over 20 years.
Really?
People don't talk about that. But depending on how the weather patterns change and things, that it impacts the state differently. I think we are in an extended dry period here that a lot of people are having to sell their cattle because the grass just isn't growing. There isn't enough moisture out in fields and pastures. And
that's close to New Mexico. I just read that they're starting some cloud seeding because there's such a severe drought and all the wildfires. Yeah. Of course, here in Colorado, we've experienced those a lot too.
Yeah.
But so those are some pretty big issues.
So we're seeing the domestic herd shrink a little bit because producers are selling their cattle. They're going into the food chain. So we're having fewer cattle out there, but demand stays high, right? So supplies may come down. Demand still is remaining high as it has all through the pandemic. So I see that price disparity thing happening there that I think could be a very big challenge for the industry.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that makes sense.
Yeah.
So now we talked about you had your own business. I mean, you grew up in Colorado, Golden rancher, one foot in each side. and then you had your own beef council, and then you eventually became the director of the Colorado Beef Council. So tell us what the day in the life of Todd looks like, and what do you like to do? Because obviously you love it.
Yeah.
I mean, we met via Greg Bloom, and great guy, and just another guy that grew up farm, quintessential Colorado guy. What does it look like from your shoes? How do your organization, how does it help the rancher? How does it help all these moving pieces? Just like we at the Colorado Food Magazine, we're trying to educate and elevate people about the entire food ecosystem.
Yeah.
So what does a day in the life of you look like?
And that's what I love about this job, is because I get to help communicate and talk about the great story that the beef industry has, right? So what we do is we use those dollars that producers give us by this, from the sale of their cattle. And what we do is we are charged with marketing and promotion, funding research, and as well as information like education programs. So what we do is we go out there and we try to find programs and marketing ideas and things to help communicate that message, whether it be educating kids in classrooms, whether it be in the nutritional message through dietitians and nutritionists, to consumers, just talking about the good news and the good message of what beef can bring. If that makes sense. So what we do,
it absolutely does.
So we have a board of directors that represent. We have one person on our board that represents each segment of the beef industry.
Talk about each segment. I'd like to hear that.
Yep. So we have 2 members from the cow-calf, like cattle raiser segment. We have 2 cattle feeders. We have a dairy rep, and then we have 2 distributors, or 2 marketers, I should say, 2 beef marketers, and then 1 distributor. So it's a great way to incorporate a voice from every segment of the beef industry. So as a staff, what we do is we go out there, we beat the bushes, we try to come up with creative ideas and programs and things where we think we can engage our story.
And tell the beef story.
Yep.
Show them where the beef is.
Exactly. So we bring those back in the board. We discuss those with the board, and the board, is knowledgeable about, they're all appointed by the governor. So they're all nominated by the industry organizations, and then appointed by the governor. So these are people who know a lot about the industry.
It's their life,
so they're current.
Right.
Yeah. And so then they vote and actually determine, what our strategic initiatives are and where we need to be spending this money. And then as a staff, we go out and execute those programs.
Okay. And then you also mentioned, you've had some partnerships in the past. What would you, in a perfect world, from your perspective, what would it look like for what the Colorado Beef Council is trying to do?
Clarify that a little bit.
Okay, in a perfect world, what's the best way to get the word out?
Gotcha.
What you're doing?
Gotcha. So. I'm a big believer that if we could just sit down and have direct communication with consumers, that's the best way to communicate. Okay. Right? I love being able to sit here and talk with people. It's hard to do when you're talking in front of bigger groups, right? Because you have
an agenda, a timeline.
Exactly. And there are people who may not trust you. And I think you can build trust a lot by just a one-on-one conversation.
I agree with that. And that's the beauty of the podcast. And you can take this story and just like send it. This is what we do. This is what we do.
Exactly.
And send it away over and over. It's going to be on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and all those.
Yeah. So I think I would love, that's kind of a strange way to answer your question, because it would be impossible to do. But I think having people having consumers to be able to learn who beef producers are and trust us and know that we can be trusted and believe our story, because there's all this chatter out there, right? That's cluttering the communication avenue. And if they could just hear a direct line of communication and know that this is the true story.
Yeah, that's misinformation like anything else.
Exactly. That's the ultimate perfect world. I'd love to have a channel where people could listen to us and know and learn and trust us.
And that's part of our goal here at the Colorado Food Magazine, is to allow everyone in the food service industry, the whole ecosystem, as I mentioned before, to tell the story of what's reality. Our goal, we're working also with the Colorado Fruits and Vegetables Association. We're going to send these guys out to the the farm, talk about peaches, talk about strawberries, talk about corn, talk about grain, talk about all these different things. Our goal is to just tell the story of Colorado food. And the same thing with ranchers.
I want to get you guys out on some ranch tours too.
Well, I'm in.
So that's the deal.
We'll talk to management. No, we'd love to get our Chefs Association. Because, the beef is a huge part of the Mexican culture, the Latin culture. And that's our goal. Once again, is to bridge cultures, talk about what's here. Chef Pablo up at the Origin Hotel, he's always, you've met him. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. You met our leadership council and stuff like that. To talk about how he can take what's in Colorado, bring his Colombian and Latin chef experience to America and just combine those. And that's the beauty of the chef. They're so creative. There's such a fusion there of all the different things of what we're trying to do. And that's what our goal, from the Hispanic Top Chef, we're eventually going to have Colorado Top Chef and America's Top Chef. So, and once again, and I'm a huge believer in beef. I mean, it's meat. It's just part of the culture, what I grew up with and stuff like that. And I grew up in Windsor, Colorado, like I said earlier, about 90 miles here. And there were farms and ranches all around there growing up. So all my friends were there. So, I mean, my bias is towards beef too, but I respect every type of, if somebody wants to be a vegetarian, I'm great with that. Vegan, I'm great with that. It's just, like I said, different cultures, the same thing from the, I'm a military guy. I have a military culture that it's always part of me, but I step into all these other cultures and the food culture, the Hispanic culture, the non-Hispanic culture, the business culture. And our goal is to just get people, like you said, to trust one another. Like, hey, let's just solve this thing together.
Exactly.
And it's done through food. And when you want to get people to just lower the trust barrier, what do?
Yeah.
We invite them over for dinner.
Yeah. Yeah.
and
think about food brings people together, right?
Oh, absolutely. And that's what I love about
you break bread. How ancient is that concept, right? You break bread together.
Exactly. And that's and I always go back to this. I mentioned it a couple times, like episode, I can't remember the episodes, but it's Chad Smith and Zach Wallace, two great friends of mine, military guys, fought over in Afghanistan and Iraq. And they talked about some of their best memories were food. And especially Chad, who was on a Tier 1 unit, Delta Force, I think I can say that. But he talked about how, the food, what they brought out, the goat and stuff like that. It was just this whole block party, and their body armor's over in one corner, and and rifles over there, and how he felt differently after breaking bread.
Yeah.
And that's, once again, I mean, think about, and Denver is going to become this, mecca of Latin food. We're going to make it that way because there's so many great chefs out here that we want to tell the world about. And that's why, like I said, we have the Latin Supper Club, we have the Hispanic Top Chef, and then we have quite a few other initiatives. But our goal, once again, is to break bread together.
Yeah. Yep.
So,
I think it's great. I think what you do is great, and I think that's why I am excited about that. You reached out like you did, because there's an opportunity to get that information out.
Yeah, and that's part of this platform.
Just being able to talk to people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what other things what do we want to talk about while you're here? Is there other things? We talked about your history.
Yep.
We talked about what you do in the day in the life of Todd Inglee, Colorado Beef Council.
Get too much into that because people would probably fall asleep at that deal.
No, that's all right. But that's important to this.
So I put, kind of maybe going back to that, people might find that interesting. I spend a lot of time traveling around the state. So I put on a ton of miles on my pickup, traveling around to local communities, small towns, and local cattlemen's associations, talking about what we do with their money and trying to communicate, the great things that we're working on and the results that we're getting as far as creating demand for their product. And I think to me, that's one of the greatest things. I also, before I got this job, I served as president of the Colorado Cattlemen's Association during its 150th anniversary. So what they do is they cover and handle all the public policy kind of issues for the beef industry, whereas the Beef Council does all the promotion, marketing, and education kind of programs. But during my year as president of the Colorado Cattlemen's Association, traveled all around the state, went to almost every local cattlemen's meeting that year.
Oh, really?
And just spoke to people and built networks and connections. Of course, I had kind of grew up in that industry, in that association, so I knew a lot of those people anyway. But I have continued to do that because I believe in bringing that message from the country to what I do, what cattle producers are thinking and feeling and what they're going through, but then also, taking consumer messages back to them and tell them what consumers are thinking and wanting and desiring in their product. And I love that part of my job. It's crazy, busy. I'm on the road a lot.
Oh, yeah? Yeah, I
love it.
Yeah.
But I love it.
That's the same thing here. What we love, we're just communicating a message, getting people to talk to one another, and just talk about the food ecosystem. How can the Colorado Food Magazine, because we would love to go to some city, state, and talk about the food and how it gets from there to here.
Yep.
Because it's just not, you just can't run down to King Soopers or Walmart or one of those places. There's a whole complex logistical chain that we have that needs to be communicated. It's not as easy as, okay, the cow is alive, it's cut up, and there it is.
Can I tell you a story about an analogy for that?
Sure.
I think it's kind of fun. I sold to a small restaurant when I had my beef business. And I remember for the first time sitting down in that restaurant and looking at the menu, like sitting at the restaurant, looking at the menu, seeing my company's logo and the brand on the menu. And I ordered, it was a hamburger, I think. It was one of my favorite. It was a spicy island hamburger, something. I loved it. I ordered that, and then, they brought it out on the plate for the first time. And I remember, my gosh, this is the product that I raised as an animal. I drove all day hauling it to the processor, down to the warehouse, keeping track of it logistically, inventory, loaded it by hand in my truck, trailer, refrigerated deal, and got it all delivered and handed. And here it is sitting here on this plate in front of me.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Thinking about how tiring it was for me to get all this way to get this hamburger on this plate right here. So you said all those steps in between, but it was so gratifying to sit there and eat this great hamburger.
We all have to eat too.
Yeah.
1,000% of us. I mean, whether it's meat, plant-based, whatever, it's cool. We would love to tell that story a few times over. Because like I said, we talk about gate to plate.
Yep.
If you could find us, hook us up with a couple of ranchers, we'll drive, we'll take team, and we'll do that logistical chain for that.
That'd be fun. That'd be a great story.
We'd like to do
make a great video. Encapsulate a short little video of the supply chain.
We would love to do that for several ranchers because, once again, as you mentioned earlier in the podcast, is we want people to know where their food comes from. It's a big deal. Everybody wants to know the story behind that and what produces it.
Why do you think people today, consumers, are wanting more knowledge of where their food comes from? Why has that changed since when we grew up?
I think it's just they're a little more sophisticated in the system, and the internet is just a very easy tool to find out a lot of information. And people, people are more environmentally conscious. They want to make sure that their food is, even if even if the cow or lamb or whatever is slaughtered, they want to make sure, at least to a certain point, they're well taken care of. And that's, and I think that's a reasonable thing.
Absolutely.
And so, I think and make sure the land is taken care of, which once again is a reasonable thing. As you see, there was so much production, and then the soil wasn't taken care of. And so, if that went on for a decade or two, then all of a sudden we're at this spot like, ooh, we're not taking care of the land. So I don't think there's a balance there. Because, we got to feed the world, so to speak, but we also have to take care of the land. And I think by you telling this story about the ranchers, they are taking care of the land. They are taking care of their animals. And if you can communicate that via us and the rancher, we can go out there and talk about it. And the same thing for the people growing the grains or the corn or the strawberries, that they're taking care of the land well, then we're like, okay, then we can get along. So
here's an interesting point to that when you made me think of it. How are we doing on time?
Oh, we're good. We're
okay.
Good. So
I've heard some of the old timers at some of these local meetings talking about how the weather patterns sound very similar to what happened during the Dust Bowl days. The weather patterns that we're having now, the winds, the fires, how dry it is. But they said, notice that we're not having these big, huge dust storms like happened back during the Dust Bowl. And they all say, I think it's because we're better stewards of the land. We're taking better care of the land than we did back in those days.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah.
And I think there's more accountability.
You still drive out east during these windy days, you'll still see big, walls of dust and stuff blowing, but it's not like it was during the Dust Bowl.
Well, that's a good point. So yeah, I'll have to do a little bit of research on that.
Some
Never
of those
thought
old
about that.
guys are they're like, this reminds me a lot of the weather that we had then. We're just not getting blown out like we did then.
Yeah.
So anyway.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Well, what else do you have? That's a lot of ground we covered. I really appreciate you coming in, telling the story of the Colorado Beef Council. We're looking forward to working with you through our Chefs Association, potentially. Sponsoring some of our events. We'd love to have you and the team at our Hispanic Top Chef, because we're obviously going to feature beef. It's just a big part of our culture.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that.
And then we're going to do some other things. We're going to have a black tie dinner. I haven't told you about yet, but to fundraise for what we're doing. Also, we're going to have a golf tournament, and of course we've talked about the festivals and stuff like that. But once again, our goal is to tell the story from the gate to the plate, farm to table, from the grain, to the consumer. And our goal is to make it all things Colorado. I'm looking forward to working with you. What do you have for us?
Same here. One other thing that I think is kind of important, is international marketing that we do. We have programs on the ground now in Japan, South Korea, China, and Central America that Colorado producers are actually paying for. But when you think of the dollars and value in exports, this is just a tidbit of information.
No, this is all great information.
Yeah, and so where a lot of this value comes from is from cuts that aren't normally eaten by American culture, but cuts that are what we call undervalued or low value cuts that normally would be sold at a discount here, but other cultures around the world see that as a great tool. Value, so they're paying high dollar for that. So just if you look at this, I just got these numbers this last week for last year. Korea is our top export market right now for Colorado beef. Valued at $416 million.
That's significant.
Goes to Korea. China is our number 2 at $299 million. And then Canada is our 3rd at $195 million. And then Japan is 4th at $171 million. And then Mexico is 5th at $149 million. And then Taiwan is at $52 million. So
wow, that's very significant.
That makes beef Colorado's number 1 agricultural export. So not only do we help make up the majority of the second largest economic driver in the state, but it's Colorado's top export product.
Oh,
agricultural export product.
I didn't know that. That's pretty fascinating. Well, if you ever need
again, that's more data than you probably wanted to know. But
actually, no, that's not. That's
a
perfect.
Huge
Our
value.
goal is to educate people of the value proposition of the Colorado Beef Council and the agriculture, because it's just a huge part of Colorado's history. It is Colorado.
It is.
And so, that's we have the cool name, the Colorado Food Magazine. So it's perfect for you to be on here.
Exactly.
So if you ever need any chefs, I happen to have some connections there.
You can count on that. Yeah. I appreciate being here, and your outreach and being able to talk to your audience is great. I just would encourage them, to check out our website at cobeef.com. There's a lot of information on there for chefs, for retailers, wholesalers, as well as consumers and beef producers. So a lot of information and tools that are available. We'll certainly do that.
We'll have Mario put those and little things there as we put it out on social media, so we grow our platforms.
That'd be good. So I thought of one other important thing. You talk about ecosystems. One thing that I forgot to mention was our participation in the backpack Beef Sticks for Backpacks program.
Sure.
So, kids that are food insecure, that rely on school food programs during the week. On the weekends, when they're not in school, they don't have food to eat. So they have come up with these backpack programs. So on Friday at school, they get bags, and backpacks or bags with food that the kids can use throughout the weekend before they come back to school.
Oh, and that's sponsored by the Colorado Beef Council.
We are part of the beef industry. This is what makes it a great story. The beef industry as a whole has come together to produce a beef stick. So a beef stick that goes in that backpack that helps add a higher protein.
Right.
level of protein, quality protein for those kids' backpack programs. So industry as a whole. So we've got feedlots, we've got processors, we've got distributors. The Beef Council has helped out. The Cattlemen's Association, the Livestock Association has all helped put this together. These beef sticks are actually being made up at Colorado State University in their food center there on campus. So students that are helping manage and run that program. But right now they're producing 20,000 beef sticks a week.
Really?
And being distributed, and they're in like 5 or 6 counties now. And the
Do
goal,
people contribute to this? Do they?
Yes.
Is it a nonprofit? How would they contribute helping this organization?
So the best way to go would be to go to look up online, search beef sticks for backpacks, Colorado beef sticks for backpacks. You'll find that link, and then it's great to see they list all the businesses that within the beef industry that has helped make this effort happen. And there's a great video on there. That I'll send you a link to send to your group, but it tells the story about why this is important to help feed these kids who otherwise wouldn't have that opportunity.
Well, then great.
But as an industry, we help create and raise the highest quality protein out there. And when it became known to us that there's this need out there, there was no doubt that we needed to pull together and help do this.
Well, that's great news.
It's a really neat story.
I'll have to check that out. We'll definitely.
Thanks for the extra time on that.
And then one last thing, we talked about the Innovation Campus and CSU. Let's briefly mention that.
So the CSU Spur Campus, which is downtown by the old stockyards in the National Western Center complex now. A building. So the Spur campus is made up of 3 different buildings. One of them is called Terra, and that's going to be land and food focused. So in that building, there's going to be a lot of innovation happening around food and land, of course. But where we're interested in is the food. I recently helped sit on a search committee for the director for the Food Innovation Center for that building. There's going to be an opportunity there for test kitchens, development tasting panel areas, things like that for entrepreneurs and food companies.
We have some food. We have some food connections. Talk to us.
They can be there and use that resource as a center, and they'll help develop. So the idea is to be able to help people innovate, scale, and help teach people and make connections for people to get their food products out.
We'd love to be involved.
I think it'd be great.
Yeah,
let's go over there. We'll make some time. I'll go over there and get a tour, and
that'd be
you'll
great.
be amazed.
Okay, I certainly will.
And it's open to the public. Anybody can go down there and see things, and it's going to be a good deal.
We'll have to bring. We started a new program June 7th and 8th at Origin Hotel. One of our chefs, the Hispanic Restaurant Association, and we called Feeding the Future. We've the first school is going to be Thornton Middle School.
Great.
A bunch of 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. We're going to feed them some great food. This group is largely Hispanic, but we're going to give them some great food. We're also going to talk about feeding their mind. The positive, anything can be done, educate and elevate. That's our goal there. But that would be a great place to us to continue to reach out and use that to educate and elevate them.
That'd be awesome.
Well, thank you for coming on.
Thanks for the time.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.